Welcome to Backyard Oasis, a podcast designed by and for older adults living in the beautiful Pioneer Valley of Western Massachusetts and produced in the tech studios at Greenfield Community College in Greenfield, Massachusetts.
Hi, I'm Denise Schwartz, your host. Today we're going to explore the richness of intergenerational relationships, why we should and how we can begin to connect with others who are generationally different from ourselves. But before we start, let me read this, taken from an article in Psychology Today online, published in March of 2025. Over 75 years ago, the groundbreaking Harvard longitudinal study of adult development began studying more than 700 men, and the research continues to the present time. Remarkably, evidence continues to show that adults who engage in meaningful relationships with younger generations are more likely to feel happier, less stressed, and more optimistic than others without these relationships. And in the same article, according to the Stanford Center on Longevity, the benefits of meaningful conversations between younger and older people are often hidden in plain sight and not recognized. These include sharing the wisdom learned through life's experiences, social and emotional intelligence, and the fact that many mature adults are highly motivated by a desire to give back to others. And then there's this. Also in the Psychology Today article, it said, Harvard professor Arthur Brooks writes that while early adults may serve problems quickly, older adults have greater insight into which problems are worth solving. And finally, before I start to introduce my guest today, I have a quote from Margaret Mead. And she said, connections between generations are essential for the mental health and stability of a nation. So my guests today are both deeply interested in intergenerational conversation, connection, and activity. Judy Raper has spent more than 3 decades working in higher education. She has primarily served in student affairs roles, but she's currently the Associate Dean for Community Engagement at Greenfield Community College in Greenfield, Massachusetts. She received her doctorate and master's degrees in higher education from the University of Vermont. And my second guest, Carly Mahowald, is earning her degree in the social sciences at Greenfield Community College. She's a work-study student with Judy, and she's been organizing community engagement events, workshops, and intergenerational projects. She's also a singer, songwriter, and a musician. Hi, Judy.
Hello.
Hi, Carly.
Hi, Denise.
So good to have you here.
Good to be here.
Okay, so let's jump right into it. Judy, you said that you grew up in a connected village. And could you tell us a little more about that? I don't even know what that is.
So I grew up in a suburb of Indianapolis, Indiana. I was born in 1964, so my formative years took place well into the 1970s. And certainly those were different times, and there are, I believe, significant geographic differences when we think about community. But when I was about 8, we moved to a town called Brownsburg and into a neighborhood that was called Northern Acres. And I might get emotional.
Oh, no.
No, because it was really good.
Aww.
It was really good.
Okay.
So I grew up, I'll start with, my mother is an extremely social person. She grew up as an only child, was very, very connected to her cousins, had a ton of friends. And so from the time I can remember, we always were entertaining people in our homes. Even before, my mom went to work and we had a little more money, and we could only serve Kool-Aid and popcorn on Friday nights, we still had people over. And I can remember when we moved into this neighborhood, we quickly became friends with a lot of the folks who lived in the neighborhood. A lot of them had kids my age or my sister's age or a little older, a little younger. And we just became this incredibly connected neighborhood. And I can remember riding my bike through the neighborhood and looking at each house and thinking, I know who lives there.
Oh, yeah.
I know who lives there.
Yeah.
If something happens to me, I know where to go. I can remember waking up on Saturday mornings and hearing voices down in the kitchen and wondering who was having coffee or breakfast with my parents. I never knew who.
Oh, my.
And so there was just this sense of love, connection, safety. I remember the blizzard of, what year was the blizzard? 78, 76, somewhere.
I think it was 76.
76.
But I don't know.
that's one of my most fond memories from childhood, because these 6 or so families that were connected, we just moved around the neighborhood throughout that week at different homes and had dinner at different people's houses. One of the gentlemen owned a liquor store, and I can remember my dad and all the guys taking a sled, walking the 2 miles to the liquor store and getting the liquor on it, bringing it back. We took vacations together. And so I often think, and I went directly from that kind of a home into living in the residence halls. My early years in higher education were in the residence halls. So I lived in the residence halls till I was 38 years old. And since that time, I'm 61 now. So ever since I moved out of the residence halls and certainly away from that neighborhood that I grew up in, I feel like I've been trying to recreate the village I grew up in. Because in the residence halls, it was easy to do that. We all lived together. We all ate together. Students studied together. And so that connection was sort of built, that capacity for connection was really built into the environmental design of the residence halls. Once I left the residence halls, there was just a real emptiness, because I feel very born to be in tight communities.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I feel like the past, and I've been at GCC now 19 years, and I feel like I'm constantly trying to rebuild the village in which I grew up.
Well, I can understand why, but I also have to think of something. Is it really possible to recreate what we had? No. I mean, in a way, though, we do. In a way, we do if we take the time to do it, because even though times have changed, families don't live with grandparents upstairs and cousins next door like they used to, we can take the time to knock on the door of the person next to our house and get to know that person and start to make those things happen. So I can understand why you want to do that. I think we're seeing a burgeoning movement of reaching out to other people, maybe started because of the pandemic, when we realized, okay,
we need each other.
Yeah. Carly, how about you?
Yeah, so I grew up homeschooled, so a very tight-knit community of homeschool cooperatives that I belonged to. I also grew up in a neighborhood that was a circle, so there was only one way out. There, no one could
That's
drive
an interesting
through.
design.
And it was very much that my parents wanted our house and our yard to be a place where the neighborhood kids could come and just play for hours.
Nice.
And every day, that's exactly what we did. My sister and I and my brother, we were just the neighborhood house where people could come over. We had a trampoline, like an Olympic trampoline. We would do all these different games on, and we also played like manhunt and other yard games, and that was a big part of my childhood. My mom really made it a point to make our home feel welcoming, and
It sounds like you and Judy had similar things, and so did I. And so I'm wondering, are we just lucky, or has time changed so much that most people don't grow up with neighbors and neighborhoods that they feel safe and comfortable in? I had a very similar neighborhood where I could ride my bike around and feel very comfortable knowing who was in each house, very much like what you said, Judy. Is that something that you think we will ever see again? And why do we have a longing for that? You said something about how you think that has brought you to the point you're at right now. The neighborhood that you had when I read the notes that you told me about the conference. Tell me about that.
Well, I want to before I go there, I want to comment really quickly on something Carly said about there was only one way to get out of the neighborhood.
Oh yeah, everybody saw you.
I think that I think that we used to do a much better job, and research would support this, of building environments that invited connection. I don't think, public gathering spaces have diminished considerably in the past 50 years. And so my thinking on that, and I feel like I have sort of an interesting personal perspective on this because I lived in the residence halls as technology changed. So when I was in the residence halls as an undergraduate, you had to go to the main lounge to watch the football game or to watch the last episode of MASH or whatever it was.
That's right.
Today, you don't have to do that. The entertainment now is inside your home. It's often solitary or with one or two other people. And so I think the necessity to leave your living space has diminished because technology
Sure.
technology begs you to stay home.
Sure.
So I think that's been one of the biggest changes that I've seen.
Well, we wanted to talk about intergenerational connections. And that brings me back to something that you talked about a little earlier, Carly. You said that you talked about your grandmother and how important she was, even though you never got to meet her.
Yes. My grandmother, my mom's mom, I've always grown up hearing stories about her and how much of a role she played in my mom's life, just in the way that she carries herself, the way that she communicates, and the empathy that she has for people, I believe, as well. My grandmother, Beatrice, worked as an addiction counselor in the 80s, I believe. And so that's an essential skill you have to go into that field. You have to be empathetic towards the other person.
Sure.
You have to go into it with a open mind and, set aside any, biases or judgments you have in order to have a productive and meaningful interaction with that person seeking help. And so, learning about my grandmother, Beatrice, has sort of informed the way that I would like to go into pursuing a career in the humanities or health fields.
Do you think that if she had been alive and you had a chance to talk with her, you would have talked about those things, or would you have been shy? Because this is something that I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I learned so much from my grandmother, my grandfather." I always felt like they were so old that I didn't really know if I wanted to talk with them. I only knew one of my grandparents, but I never had that desire to have a conversation with her, and I'm wondering why.
Yeah, I think knowing how to approach a conversation with older generations is something that's not talked about too often. So there is definitely an uncertainty and maybe like hesitancy,
Yes,
to know how to best do that. And I think that a good approach to starting to form those kinds of connections would be to just show interest in their lives in any way that you can, find a mutual interest. I feel that is really something that can build on conversation and just be a good guide to start a conversation even. And for example, I think that I mentioned to you, I was working with this woman, Jane, on an intergenerational film project.
Oh, yes, I
over the
wanted to
semester.
talk about that. Go ahead.
And Judy introduced us, which I was very grateful for. We connected pretty much right when we first met on the fact that we are both musicians and play piano, and that was something that excited both of us initially. And as we started to talk more and get to know each other better, we started to explore themes of like family and our siblings and how we relate in our like interpersonal relationships and just how we view the world as well. And
So let's talk a little bit about that film. You helped her make a film about her life, or what was it?
so our film, the name of it is called Coming of Age. So we wanted to explore the differences and similarities in our lives, having such a expansive gap in our ages.
Sure.
Jane is 89. She was born in 1936. And I'm 23. I was born in 2003. So you can definitely see
She was born in the 1900s.
Yes, exactly. So there's a lot to learn from a person growing up in that time.
Did you want to
period.
learn about someone who grew up in 1936?
Absolutely. I don't get the chance to do so very often, and this was the perfect opportunity to just expand my view on social work, and technology as well. I learned a lot about how she kind of grew up with not much technology at all.
Two things I wanted to know. Did she really want to learn about what it was like for you to grow up? Did she show real interest?
She did, yeah. She is such an incredible listener. I really just took note of that from talking with her on several different occasions. She's very willing to learn from someone like me who has a different life experience, and she's very good at listening and just inquiring.
Do you think, now you had a project to work on with somebody from another generation, but do you think that your peers would feel the same way about wanting to learn from someone from a generation that was different from theirs in general?
I think about my sister. I have a twin sister, and she definitely, when I mentioned to her that Jane and I were connecting so well and just getting along, Jane was interested in meeting Erica, my sister, and so I invited them to get together, and we are going to do that in the future. But yeah, I think that my sister she definitely showed that interest and wanted to learn kind of about her experience as an older adult, and given that she's also going into the public health kind of field,
right.
I would think that she would definitely want to learn a lot from Jane.
I just want to comment, too, sort of on how this relationship came to be. So I run a volunteer program through my OASIS program. OASIS stands for Older Adults Seeking, Inspiring, and Serving at GCC. And Jane is one of our welcome desk volunteers. So I asked Carly, as part of her work study position, to help out at the welcome desk. So she started developing relationships with some of these older adults. And Jane was one of them. So she met Jane prior to the film festival. But I think that's been one of the really, when we think about how do we create the environment that supports these kinds of relationships, my program actually allows for that. And so all the work study students who have worked with me, I always ask in the interview, are you comfortable with older people? Because you're going to be working with them. So Carly had indicated that she was. Last year I had 2 work study students, Olivia and Jessica, who walked away with multiple meaningful older relationships with older adults. So the nature of the position necessitates that kind of connection, and Carly was always comfortable.
It sounds to me like, in general, people are open to having conversations or connections, or even just hello, hi, how are you? Maybe a short conversation, maybe not a really long one, but they're open to that, but they don't have the opportunities to make that happen. You know, I wanted to know about that. I wanted to read something, and maybe you can both talk about this, and maybe it's something that came up in the conference that you were both at and that you both helped organize. It says, studies have shown that the benefits of intergenerational connectedness goes both ways, that younger people gain insights from the lived experiences of older adults, wisdom that can only come from a been there, done that perspective that many of their peers can't offer. And conversations with seniors about past events and societal changes can broaden a younger person's perspective on the world. I just want to know if you think that's true, but I wanted to read the other side of that. And older adults benefit from having new ideas stretch their perspectives. I want to know if you found that to be true when you were working with your friend on the film. Learning new ways of expressing ideas, learning new vocabulary, which I think is really important, hearing how situations and life views they may have encountered in their younger years are very different from what younger people are encountering today. Does that resonate with you all? And did you talk about that kind of thing in the conference? Maybe you can move into the conference a little.
The conference was, we hosted a conference called Bridging Generations. I forget what came after the colon a couple of weeks ago. And it was a follow-up to a book. We did a book club in the fall. Some of the faculty and staff and I got together, and we pitched an idea for an innovation project, and the president's office gives us money for these innovations that we don't otherwise have the budget and the time to do. So we read a book called I Never Thought of It That Way by an author named Monica Guzman. And Monica and her parents are immigrants from Mexico, and she wrote the book during Trump's first term. And her parents are Trump supporters, and she is not. And you hear so many stories of families that have broken up over that very conflict. And Monica leaned into trying to better understand why her parents voted for Trump and why they believed what they believed. And so we did that book club in the fall, and I wanted to really continue with that theme because I thought it was powerful. And I think right now it's so important that we're talking across political differences and ideological differences. So this panel was a group of folks ages 18 to 75, and each of them described the historical and political moments that had shaped their worldview.
Wow.
So, you have people whose worldview was shaped potentially by the Iranian hostage crisis or the Vietnam War or going into space or the Challenger explosion. And then you have people that were shaped by 9/11. They were in really developmentally important years when 9/11 happened. Or folks that literally their whole lives have just known this political division and COVID. And so it was so powerful. It was really incredible to hear people talk about how memories of those moments, imprints of those moments shaped who they are. And when we can understand why someone believes what they believe, even if we can never agree, even if we think they're wrong in ways that are morally reprehensible, I think empathy starts when we can at least understand how they got there. And sometimes those differences are, have nothing to do with generations, because certainly, my mom is a boomer. And I think her political leanings are much like Generation Z, so it's not always about generational differences, but I think certainly what we remember and are imprinted on as children through our television sets, our radios, our politicians, our churches, our, local leaders shapes who we are.
Well, that also speaks to this thing where people say, history repeats itself, so why don't we pay more attention to history? So when you talk to someone whose history is different from yours, you are going to be learning the why. And the why, I think you brought it up, Judy, really well. The why, once we understand why somebody thinks or acts a certain way, we can gain maybe an understanding of it and can just sort of shake our heads and say, well, okay, I don't get it that way, but I can see why you do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The divisiveness in our country in particular right now is just so rampant, and I think the ability to look at news sources and also just communicate in a way that's productive and accurate, is essential to have these meaningful conversations.
What are you going to do with what you learned at the conference, Carly? How are you going to use what you learned? What are you going to think about most?
So I'm going to think about the time that I'm growing up in right now, and so much is going on that it is hard to keep track of all of the sort of world events that are happening. But I'm going forward, I'm going to take what I've learned from the conference and the perspectives shared from different lived experiences and paths to help me move forward in a way that is going to allow me to be conscious of what's happening around me.
Good.
And not just sort of put it on to the side, not be sort of complacent, but actually be more of an ally and
that's a good word.
Take more action, be more active.
I love hearing that. That should make you feel really good about organizing, helping to organize that.
Yeah, it was really the planning committee was somewhat intergenerational. I was the oldest, and then we had Sarah, who's in her 40s, and then we had students. And so it was really, I think it was very powerful to organize it with those different generations. And I did an afternoon session with my colleague, Linda McCarthy, who teaches sociology at GCC, and the title of the session was, Yes, We Should Talk About Religion and Politics. And it was a very popular session for the participants. It's always interesting to me how popular that kind of topic is when it's something that's become so taboo. And
because somebody else is organizing and allowing that to be talked about, and you can sit there and either decide you're going to or not. You're not in a situation where you have to.
Well, I think what I was intrigued by, and I've been intrigued by this my entire career, I did my dissertation on what happens to a student's faith journey when they come to a secular institution. That was my dissertation topic. And I did my dissertation at the University of Vermont, which was at the time ranked the least religious institution in the country. And so my advisor was like, who's going to talk to you about this? I couldn't get everyone in who wanted to talk about it. And I think whether your worldview is shaped by religious beliefs or not, people want to talk about what gives their lives meaning.
Yes.
And for many of us, my political outlook and view has a lot to do with who I am as a person. It's part of the way I find meaning. My religious upbringing, the same thing. And so I think people are eager to talk about what matters most. And when we make those topics taboo, our connections are less than they could be. So I think the people who showed up in that space were eager for that conversation.
So I think that says continue to do it.
Oh, 100%.
Let's just go back to the topic that we started with. And you wanted to talk about Robert Putnam a little bit, the author of Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community. It was now 26 years old. It was published in 2000. You wanted to talk about Robert Putnam a little bit. And his work shows how social bonds are the most powerful predictor of life satisfaction. I don't think we have to say anything other than that. Social bonds are the most, this is his theory. Social bonds are the most powerful predictor of life satisfaction.
So I came across Robert Putnam when I watched a documentary called Join or Die on Netflix. And I remember hearing about his book in the 90s. He wrote Bowling Alone back in the 90s. And I remember hearing about that. And I was a bowler, so I was kind of attracted to the title. But anyway, so Robert Putnam, he became very interested in what makes government effective. That was kind of his sort of leading question. And he went over to Italy when this new government was forming in Italy. And he studied these different regional governments to try and figure out what made government strong and what made government weak. And what he learned was what made government strong was strong bonds between the citizens and among the citizens that they were leading, so that community sort of dictated the effectiveness of government. So he has shared through his writings and his speeches and his teaching. He's now in his 80s. He lives up in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, so he's not that far away. I tried to meet with him last summer. But anyway, what he really outlines in all of his work is the decline of social, I would call it architecture of belonging is what I would call it, relational infrastructure. So we have far less gathering spaces. When you think about where we hung out, Denise, maybe as kids versus where Carly and her friends hang out. Like we had malls, we had skating rinks, we had movie theaters that we had playgrounds. All of those are diminishing. And all the other thing that what Join or Die is really about has been the decline in people joining clubs and organizations. And when you think about the whole theme of bowling, so that title of that book came along because he was talking to his friend who owns a bowling alley. And his friend said, business is great. Like the people are always bowling, but there's been a real decline in league bowling. And when I think back to my 25 plus years in bowling leagues, that is the one place where I was sure to meet someone who saw the world very differently than me. If I'm only hanging out with my friends in higher education, I'm not necessarily going to encounter a lot of difference. But when you're sitting around the scoring table and you're bowling, you have to talk, and you have to talk to whoever's on the other team. And so this is really simplifying his very eloquent and complex message. But in essence, he's saying social capital has declined, and it has brought us to this moment.
It's interesting. He said social capital refers to the connections among individuals, social networks, and the norms of reciprocity and trustworthiness that arise from them.
Yes.
Much like the economic concepts of physical and human capital, the social networks of social capital are thought to have value. His book demonstrates a drop in social capital in contemporary America, just like you said, and it identifies the cause and consequences of it and suggests ways to improve it. I liked what he said about bridging and bonding social capital. Bonding social capital networks are inward-looking and tend to reinforce exclusive identities and homogenous groups, and examples of such networks include ethnic fraternal organizations and country clubs. And then on the other hand, bridging social capital networks are outward-looking and include people across diverse social cleavages. Examples are civil rights movements, and the youth service groups.
So I would add to that list one very important one.
What's that?
I think, and I have lived experience in recovery, so I can really speak to this. I think Bill Wilson, who invented Alcoholics Anonymous, is one of the most brilliant designers of community in our history. And what makes those organizations, those 12-step organizations, so effective is the understanding that our faiths are connected. So if you have the disease of alcoholism, it is a disease that can kill you. And the cure is to connect with other human beings,
exactly.
which is really powerful. And I think that if we could understand that on a global scale, we'd live in a very different world. And the other thing about those organizations is what they're rooted in is people's stories. So people are, if you ever go to a 12-step meeting, you will hear people sharing their personal stories. And I think our stories are a fantastic example of bridging social capital.
And stories are also the things that you remember. You telling us about your grandmother who you never met, but she kind of was in the career that you want to go into. That's what you remember. You remember the stories. I think it's really important, too.
I do as well. It definitely connects us in ways that we probably wouldn't expect. And, it's so important to lean into these relationships that you really can get a lot out of.
We're going to have to wind down now, but I feel like there's just so much that we can talk about. Do you think that what we're doing right now is helpful? Because I've known Judy for a couple of years. I've just met you. We're of different generations. Are we doing what we're saying is really an important thing to do? Sitting here, having a conversation for other listeners, of course, in our show today, but also having the conversation that we've never had before, the three of us. Is this an important thing that we're doing? I'm just wondering, we came here to do the show, but are we benefiting from just sitting here and doing this together too?
I think so. I think it's having a conversation with new people of different generations is, I feel like it's never, it can be not productive, but I think in most cases like this, where it is facilitated in a space where we can be productive and learn from each other, from sharing our experiences and viewpoints, it is definitely helpful, for me at least, to be able to engage like this.
What do you think, Judy?
Yeah, I think any opportunity we have to talk about the power of connection is important, whether it's in a podcast studio or in a bowling alley or in an old-time mall or even over the iPhone. Whenever we have opportunities to talk about the power of relationship, particularly intergenerational, but other kinds of relationships as well, we're putting something into the universe that I think is a good thing.
I do too, and I think that what we want to, I'm going to ask you what you'd like to leave listeners with, but I kind of have the idea that it's a little bit easier to do than we think it is. That it's okay to maybe start with a wave. Like going up and down the street when I first lived on our street, people would drive by and I'd be going for walks and I would wave and nobody would wave back. And now we've all gotten to know each other because we've made an effort. We started a neighborhood group. We've made an effort to know each other. And now, not only do we wave to each other, but I always say to my husband, okay, I've got to be there at noon, which means I better leave at 11 because I got to drive up the street and I'm going to see blah, blah, and blah, blah, and blah, blah, and they're all going to want to talk. It starts with one really small effort to reach out to somebody and just say, hey, Judy, how are you doing? How are you doing today? You want to go have coffee? Or Carly, I didn't know you before. It's really been nice to know who you are. And maybe we should go get coffee when this is over. What do you think?
I would love that.
You want to do that?
I just want to say, I think one of the really interesting pieces of research that came out after the COVID pandemic changed all of our lives was what the absence of those informal interactions that you just described with our cashiers, with our waitresses, with our flight attendants, the absence of those in people's lives, how they impacted them, it was just as great as missing your grandchildren. Like those interactions also make up our social networks, and their absence can create a real gap.
It's the glue that kinds of hold communities together. And I remember when our local bank closed. And then we could go to the ATM, but it was like, I used to go into the bank and talk to the cashier, the person who was behind the desk or whatever it was called, and talk to her about my money and then what was going on in town. And I really thought, oh, this is the start of something that I don't really like. So the glue that holds us all together is just us talking about this kind of stuff. Are you going to do, let's just know that we have to close now, but are you going to be doing, through the college or any place else, other conferences like the ones that you just talked about?
I don't have well, we're wrapping up the academic year, and my community engagement calendar sort of coincides with the academic year. However, on Friday, June, is it 6th or 7th? I can't remember what the Friday is, but coming up, I just put in the marketing request for this. We are bringing an expert from Boston and having a youth panel talk about the impact of social media on the lives of young people and their capacities for connection. So that will be a really interesting conversation. We'll have some food. This is all the result of a grant that we are doing with Hilltown Recovery Theater. I may have just gotten their name a little bit wrong there, so I apologize.
That's okay.
But I have that coming up, and then hopefully next year we gotten some really good feedback about the panel and some suggestions for follow-up. So
I love it. Keep us informed. Would like to do that. I don't know if this show will be live by the time you're doing that 6th or 7th panel, but maybe we could see if that could happen. Will,
our
who's our producer, who's also of a different generation, and whom I did say, please feel free to jump in and talk while we're doing this, but remained quiet. But we'll get him into another conversation sometime soon.
Sounds good.
Okay. I love talking to both of you. I loved finding out more about you, Judy, who I've known in a very different way for 2.5 years. It was really nice to hear about how you grew up in that fabulous village kind of neighborhood. It was really good to find out who you are, and I can see from the way you're smiling that I think you enjoyed talking about,
I did.
about this.
I did.
It was great.
Maybe we can do it again. What do you say?
Love that.
Yeah, part 2.
Part 2.
I would love a part 2.
All right. Who's going to make the coffee? And more importantly, who's going to pay for it? Judy?
I don't make coffee or drink coffee, so I guess I'll pay for it.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This concludes today's podcast. We're always looking for new ideas, so feel free to reach out to Judy Raper, Associate Dean of Community Engagement at Greenfield Community College, at 413-775-1819 if you have an idea you'd love to share. Special thanks to the creators of Backyard Oasis, Denise Schwartz, Chad Fuller, Dennis Lee, and Christine Copeland. Have a great day.